There's this incident when I was teaching code to some grade 8 students, and I taught them a certain algorithm as part of the coding curriculum. And then, as I was teaching them, the one youngster raised his hand and he said to me, "Sir, I found a better way of doing this, a shorter way of doing this algorithm than you did." So I said, I really thought about this, not really likely that you did so, but let me have a look. And when I looked at it, it was true that he had found a shorter, more efficient way of creating that algorithm than I had taught them. Now, I knew there might be better ways of doing it, but I didn't realize that it was going to be a grade 8 kid that's going to do this, that's going to be able to come up with this. Now, that, needless to say, that incident really amazed me. It really amazed me, and it really gave me something to think about, which is this, that there is so much of potential hidden in kids. And I'm calling them kids in a more general sense, right? And I'll tell you why this is not a good idea later on. But I saw rather, that there is tremendous potential. And then it got me really thinking about how valuable are these years from 12, 13 years old to 18 years old. And it also got me thinking that, are we using this potential correctly in our current education system? So I went back into history, and boy oh boy, what I found was actually quite impressive. Pretty much every high achiever we know in history, whether it was in the academic field, whether it was in the field of language, of writing, of poetry, of war, of government, every single high achiever, with a few exceptions, started at a very young age. They started around about 10, 11, 12 years old. So they started honing their skills at that age. They chose the vocation of their choice, the vocation that they were passionate about, and they just grew with it. And by the time they were in their late teens, 15, 16 years old, they were absolute experts, known global experts in what they did. Let me give you some names, right? People like Julius Caesar, Mozart, the composer, Charles Dickens, the author, Marie Curie, even Shakespeare. These people all started at a very young age, and they mastered their crafts in their teen ages, and then they were well on their way with their careers by the time they were in the late teens. Now, what do we do instead? We do something completely different. The first thing we did was we designated this age group from 13 to 18 as teenagers. And then we reduced these people to being children, underage. And then we forced them into a schooling system which really doesn't cater to their needs, which really oppresses them. And I know it sounds like extreme language, but believe me, when I explain to you what is going on in the world, you will understand. So this construct of the teenagers was created, and we decided that these people will be treated like children, and they'd be forced into going into school and becoming proper students for the sake of it. Now, in doing this, what we've done is, first and foremost, we've robbed them of the opportunity to grow in the space that they desired. We've robbed ourselves of the opportunity to find the real best inside of these kids, because we put them into a one-size-fits-all classroom, right? There's 40 people sitting in a class, and we treat them all equally. I was a teacher, and I know. And it's no fault of the teachers. It's the system that placed everybody there. So we deprived ourselves of the chance of bringing out the best in each one of them. In the old days, it was different. There was the apprenticeship system where you would go and you would work as an apprentice in the vocation of your choice, and you would grow in that space. But here, we've got this standardized system of education that treats everybody as if they are born academics. And those who are not academic, those who are artistically inclined, for example, are put at a severe disadvantage. All right, so we robbed them and we robbed ourselves. But it's a lot more ominous than that and a lot more disastrous than just that. Because in treating these human beings, these people who turn 13, 14 years old, what in treating them like children, what we've done is we've created a kind of cognitive dissonance inside them. It's kind of a deep confusion inside them. Because on one hand, their bodies, their minds, everything about them is saying, you are now an adult. Their bodies are developing. Their emotions are developing. Their minds are developing. And we get a surprise, right? As parents, hey, my child, he was such a sweet kid. Now he's become rebellious. He's not rebellious. Please, he is not rebellious. He is now realizing, he's coming into an age where he's realizing that I am an adult now. And I need to be treated like an adult. I need to have choices like an adult. I need to choose what vocation I want to get into. I want to choose what to do with my life, just like an adult. It's similar to the so-called terrible twos. We hear about the terrible twos. Now, there's a reason why children behave in a certain way when they reach 2 years old. It's because that's a major transitional point in their lives. What happens in that age in their lives is that they become self-aware. Up until that point, from the time the child is born until just before that, the child just exists. It reacts. It responds to stimuli. For example, I'm hungry, so I cry. I get fed, so I stop crying. Things like that. I feel an ache and I cry. But come 2 years old, the child suddenly becomes self-aware that, hey, I'm a human being. I'm a living, breathing being. Although they won't say it in those words, but deep down in their psyche, that's what's happening. They've come to realize that they are existing human being and that they have choices, that they can make their own choices. Now, what happens is that we go into a battle of wills with them. As parents, we go into this battle of wills, that the child wants something and I want something else, and so there's a battle of wills, and we call that the terrible twos. But now the next major transition is when the child is coming to his or her teenagers. That is the age when there's a new realization coming that not only am I an independent human being, but I am an adult now. And this is a major transition. Now, when a child reaches that age, the age of teenagers, and realizes that I'm an adult now and I have choices, that I can live my life, or I should be living my life the way I want, what do we do as adults? What are we told to do? What does the school tell us to do? Suppress it. Severely suppress it, because they are not adults yet. They will only turn adults magically on their 18th birthday. Can you imagine what a silly notion that is? What an absurd notion that is. That if the child's birthday, if a person's birthday is, say, on the 15th of January, then on the 14th, he's a child, and on the 15th, he's an adult. What changed? Except the sun went down and the sun came up again. Nothing changed in him. But in a major, major transitionary stage in his life, where his body, his mind, his emotions are completely changed, where he goes into this, from a caterpillar going into the pupa stage and coming out a completely different creature. That's what's happening. Such a major transformation. We ignore that entirely. We say, well, that's still a child. But just that sunset and sunrise on the day before his birthday and the day after his birthday, we suddenly realize that that person is a teenager or an adult. We designate this person as an adult, but ignore the major change that just took place. That is absurd. And so what we do, we suppress this. And when we suppress it, suppress any human being, even with all the love in the world, and they will rebel. Human being's nature is like that. We learn in Islam that a person is more inclined to the things you prevent him from. The person becomes greedy almost for the things that you tell him he cannot have. And so what happens with these teens is that in school, they are treated like children. Sit there and listen to the authority in front. At home, they are treated like children. And what do we say to them? We say to them that you are my child, you're living in my home, and you will do what I want you to do. But what do they say? Mom, stop treating me like a child. Dad, stop treating me like a child. How many times have we heard our kids, our teenagers saying that to us? They are saying it. They are expressing their thoughts, their feelings to you. And what do? You ignore it. No, you are a child. They are not children. They are not children. They are adults now. Now, where did this idea come about of treating teenagers as children? Let me tell you. This came about in the early 1900s in the USA. And it was a way of controlling the population and making people more manageable. Because if you look at every pre-industrial society, even in many modern societies, non-Western societies, there are only two designations for a human being. You are a child or you are an adult. You are an immature child or you're a mature adult. It's one of the two. There's no such designation of teenagers. So the whole concept of teenagers is an artificial construct that was developed by some well-meaning but misguided psychologists in the US. So you had this massive influx of immigrants coming into the country, and the government didn't know what to do with them. So rather than have them out on the streets, they implemented a system of mandatory standardized education, and they put them in there. But there was a more ominous reason. The other ominous reason was the industrialists realized that they're going to need robots to work in their factories. So just as with the factories now, everything started to become more systemized, the age of the standardized process-based factory system, the assembly line came about. So they felt like, let's make an assembly line out of education. So a kid goes in there for a grade 0, 1 through grade 12 and come out a proper worker for our factories. So they tried to implement what they used in machinery and commodities into human beings, which tells you something about Western philosophy, about not just Western, but the free capitalist philosophy, which is that everything is a commodity, including human beings. So human beings can be trained in that system, in that 12-year system, and they'll come out as good, productive factory workers. So that was the other ominous reason behind it. So this was an artificial construct. And as is the way with the West, whatever they come up with needs to be pushed to the whole world. The Western system is very intolerant to any other systems. Western ideology, as much as they take the moral high ground and call other ideologies or refer to them as being intolerant, there is no system more intolerant than the Western system. When the West takes over, then their whole idea is to completely obliterate any other ideologies, any other philosophies, any other learning, ancient learning. Tens of thousands of years of wisdom are washed out because a certain Western philosopher or scientist or psychologist said that this is the way it should be. But that's another topic altogether. So what happened was that this whole ideology was pushed to the rest of the world, and they are still pushing it, and they're pushing it hard. Now, we the people living under Western domination, we have a choice. Either we blindly and just subserviently accept everything that's coming out of the West because it's the West, or we stand up and we really ask questions about it. Now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying go the postmodernist route and deconstruct everything that's coming out of the West because everything coming out of there is useless. I'm not saying that at all. There's a lot of good that came out of the West. What we need to do is to re-examine some very entrenched ideas like the 12-year schooling system, like the idea of treating teenagers like kids, like the curriculums that are being taught. For example, why is it we are taught in history, we are taught the Renaissance and we are taught Roman history, but that's it. Because it's all European history. We need to ask these questions and we need to reinvent some of these ideologies that have been pushed down onto us. And particularly in developing countries like in Africa, like in South Africa, I mean, we've got about 40 or 45 million unemployed people. The vast majority of them are young adults, everything from 13 to 20, 25 years old. These people are the country's greatest asset, just sitting there without being tapped, without being utilized to become productive members of society, productive members of the economy, and it's causing the entire economy of the country to sink. What do we do? What do we need to do? Well, we need to firstly stop this colonialist mentality, this colonized mentality, and start asking questions. That questions like, what is the best approach for us? What is the best approach for our economy, for our society? And the answer will be very, very straightforward and very simple, right? From as young as 12, 13 years old, we need to start teaching or allowing teenagers, these young adults, to get into the vocation of their choice. And by 18, 19, they can get into the workforce. Instead, what do we do? Let me tell you what we do. You know what we do. We spend 12 years, or we get them to spend 12 years in school. Okay, now it's gone more than 12 years, right? Because there was nursery school, and then there was grade R, and then now there's grade double R. So there's 3 years before, 12 years off school. That's 15, plus 4 years at university, 19 years. And they still come out unemployable, completely unemployable. They can't get a job because why? There's no skills. They don't have the skills to enter the workforce. Heck, they don't even have human skills. They don't have even basic daily, everyday life skills. So 15 years, 1.5 decades, the most formative decade and a half in the life of a human being, when people like Shakespeare and Mozart became the geniuses they were in that age. What we've done, we've wasted it. We've thrown it into the bin. And then they come into their mid-20s and they are lost. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do with their lives. They cannot make decisions about their own careers. And then parents are struggling with that. They say, well, my son is, or my daughter is lost. They're not lost. It's just that they've been suppressed for so long that they lost the ability to fight. They lost that fight in them. They lost the ability to think for themselves, to make these decisions. Now, what we need to do as a country, as a continent, as the developing world, is to shed these ideas. Forget about decolonizing education and things. That's second stage stuff. But there's more pressing matters, which is decolonizing our own mindset, our own thinking. If it comes from the West, it's not necessarily good for us. Well, it's not even good for them, because if you look at the rate of depression, teen angst, suicide, violence, delinquency in Western countries, it's shocking. It's shocking how bad things are with people in their teens, and they are losing the battle. Yet in countries where they gave kids, like there was an experiment in Scotland where they gave teenagers who were delinquents, who are problematic, they gave them the opportunity to go and serve as interns under a responsible adult in a specific trade. 98% of the problems just disappeared. Emotional problems, delinquency problems, aggression, everything disappeared. Why? Psychologists and amazing psychologists, like highly qualified, highly learned psychologists, are telling us that when you start treating them like adults and you give them purpose, you give them meaning, you give them choice, you treat them like you would like to be treated, and you allow them to learn things that they find meaning in, that they find value in, and do the types of work they find value in, then all of that is just gone. All those problems go away. Rather, what we do is we throw them to the wolves. We throw them to the wolves of marketing, of consumerism, of Hollywood entertainment. And what do these people have? What is their intention? Their intention is for the best of that teenager, isn't it? It's for their good. Or is it something else, something more demonic, if I can say so? It's all about how can we exploit them to buy our products? How can we exploit them to embrace a certain lifestyle and a certain culture? This is all free, free capitalism is all about. It's not about making the world a better place. It's about exploitation of human beings to a point where human beings are treated like commodities. Let's not throw our kids to the wolves. Let's be responsible and make sure that we guide them to what's best for them and we protect them from these evil forces, these forces which will call you intolerant as an adult, as a parent, but they themselves are the most intolerant. So how do we need to treat our teenagers? Very simple, and I'll conclude on this. First and foremost, the education system in our countries needs a complete reform. From the age of 12, 13 years old, we need to introduce our students into the vocation of their choice. Forget the standardized education system. Now, I'm not being idealistic here. That standardized education system that treats everybody like an academic needs to die. And we need to diversify the education system to cater to the needs of learners who have different strengths, who have different learning preferences, who have different aspirations for their lives. We need to bring in more vocational training and give kids who want to opt for that the opportunity to opt for it. So there needs to be more vocational schools. And those who want to remain in the academic line, fine, give them more responsibilities in that line. Even in that scenario, where a teenager opts to remain in school, to remain in the academic stream, rather than make it a sage on the stage kind of teacher teaching, subservient student kind of system, why not reinvent the education system so we produce thinkers, we produce people who are able to think for themselves and who are able to make decisions for themselves, who are able to take responsibility for their own learning. There's enough of studies around that. When you give teenagers the opportunity to take responsibility for their own learning, they fly with it. They just take over and they run with it, and they do better than if they were forced to sit and listen to the teacher droning on. So these are the things that we need to do as parents and as a society. And with those, I thank you for listening.